Here we are in an early model JK with a 5.3 Gen 4 engine. This is an early Gen 4 engine, 2007 or 8. It was upgraded to a later model operating system. 5.3 is a great motor, but it's really not intended to haul the weight that the 6.0 or the 6.2 is. So in a lighter JK, it does a great job. So if your JK has 35s or less and not a whole lot of armor, this is a really good choice. So the earlier 5.3s, at least most of them, did not have variable valve timing. They ran slightly higher compression. The LY5 and the LH6 were great motors. They did not have VVT, they did not have flex fuel. The earlier 07 and 08 engines ran a Delco map sensor. You can upgrade a 7 or 8 to a newer operating system and then run the later model operating system, which works pretty good, and that's actually what happened to this one. GM changed the injectors for flex fuel, changed the intake for the map sensor. The fuel rails are different. So if you want to upgrade an early 7 or 8 to a later model operating system and run a 238 computer, you need to change out the map sensor and do a little bit of tuning. You should also change out the early oil pressure sensor. The oil pressure sensor on the earlier engines was a small diameter sensor that was prone to leaking. So we replaced them out with a larger sensor, and then it just plugs into the later model harness. 2009, they went from the early model map system to the late model map system. So if you have a 2009 L9H, for example, you can literally plug it right into a 2010 or newer operating system and it will work perfectly. There's no differences in the hardware. On the earlier engines, like the 7 and 8s, in order to run those as a later model engine, you have to make some changes. The non-VVT engines are higher compression. These engines will go into performance enrichment quicker than the larger engines because of the lack of torque. So on heavy loads, you might notice that the larger engines will get better economy. On the lighter loads, you'll notice this engine will get better economy. Just don't make the mistake of getting a heavy JK on 40s with 1 tons, putting a 5.3 in it, and expecting to cruise 80 miles an hour up the Baker grade. But for expedition, off-roading, it's hard to beat the 5.3. These motors are economical. And here's something I wanted to talk about because a lot of my customers run into this issue. Think that if they buy a 6L80 and an LS Gen 4 engine, it's going to work, and that's not necessarily the case. The reality is you have to match the engine and the transmission. Inside of the transmission is what's called a transmission control module, or a TCM. That transmission control module has an operating system built into it. If you have a 2007 or 8 transmission control module, think of it as Windows XP. If you have a 2010 or newer, think of it as Windows 10. 2009 was a go-between year. The basic 3 computers that we have are the 2007 and 8 384. That's the last 3 numbers of the service number. So we have the 384 in 2007 and 8, 455 in 2009, 238 in 2010 and above. And GM did a really good thing when they standardized the computer and just essentially made all the operating systems compatible. If you were to try to tune a 2007 or 8 transmission control module for a 2010 or newer operating system, the odds are it wouldn't take it. It would start to program and then stop. You might even brick the module. Same thing if you tried to program the ECM with an early model operating system. You just don't want to do that. If you have an early model transmission and a late model engine, you got some decisions to make. The best choice is to match the hardware properly like it should be. 2009 is a very good year. I actually have a 2009 L9H in my Jeep. It does run the later model hardware, but it does run its own operating system. So if you have a 2009 engine and transmission, you're good. This particular combination I'm driving now is an early model 5.3 with a late model operating system. The late model operating system definitely runs better in my opinion. The late model operating system has advantages, so this customer chose to stay with a late model transmission, an early model 5.3 engine, and then modify the map sensor so that it would run off the late model operating system, and it runs really good. The 6L80 was carried over into the Gen 5 engines, making it a versatile transmission. You can run the 6L80 in most of the Gen 4s and the Gen 5 engines, whether that's a 6.2 or a 5.3. The operating systems are very different, so make sure when you get a 6L80, you get an engine and a transmission that are matched, number 1. And 2, if you did not get the engine and transmission from the same vehicle, you may have to program that TCM or that 6L80 to match the ECM. This is a really important step that a lot of guys don't know about. When you're done with a swap, you might get in it and it might shift, but tap shift doesn't work, or it might shift oddly. It really is best to match the TCM to the engine control module so that you know that the network is operating properly. The best way is to use GM Service Programming System, or SPS. Using the GM software means that you're going to load the entire operating system into that TCM properly, the way it's intended to be. Some guys will go in and just modify the calibration, which I'm not a big fan of because the background operating system isn't right. Once you're done programming the TCM to match your ECM, you should check your vehicle speed. Using the GM Data Link connector, look at vehicle speed on the scanner and compare it to GPS. You want to be within 1 or 2 miles an hour at 50, 60 miles an hour. Faster you go, the larger the error is going to be. By doing that, the transmission is going to operate properly. If your vehicle speed is off too much, you might get some odd behavior. Obviously, the transmission shifting strategy is based off of vehicle speed, etc. We're going to hit the mountain with this 5.3 and we'll see you later.